I'm Megan Mitchell, 27, and last Thanksgiving changed everything. As I sat in my parents' marble-floored dining room, surrounded by success I hadn't achieved, my brother Kyle smirked at my thrift store dress. My sister Ashley's diamond bracelet caught the light while she asked if I was still doing that website thing. Nobody noticed my vintage watch, until Dad's eyes locked onto my wrist mid-lecture about financial responsibility. His face transformed instantly. Before I tell you how my watch silenced everyone at the table, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt like the family disappointment despite working your heart out. The Mitchell family success story was something my father, Thomas, loved to recount to anyone who would listen. 30 years ago, he and my mother Diane started with a single property and built Mitchell Realty Group into a regional powerhouse with 16 offices across 3 states. Our family home reflected that success, a 7,000 square foot mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in town, with manicured gardens and a 3-car garage housing vehicles that cost more than most people's homes. My older brother Kyle, 32, joined the family business straight out of college. He now served as the chief operating officer, managing day-to-day operations while Dad focused on expansion. Kyle embodied everything my parents valued: ambition, business acumen, and material success. By 30, he had his own mansion in the same neighborhood as our parents, a portfolio of investment properties, and a country club membership. His wife Jessica came from a similar wealthy family, and together they represented the perfect power couple at every social function. My sister Ashley, 30, handled all the marketing and public relations for Mitchell Realty. With her business degree and perfectly polished appearance, she was the face of the younger generation of the company. Her husband Brian, a corporate attorney, complemented her perfectly in my parents' eyes. They lived in a luxury condo downtown and spent weekends at their vacation home at the lake. Ashley's Instagram account was a carefully curated display of their enviable lifestyle: exotic vacations, charity galas, and designer shopping sprees. Then there was me, the family outlier. Despite excelling academically throughout school, I had disappointed my parents by pursuing a creative career instead of joining the family business. I still remember the tension in the room when I announced I was majoring in graphic design instead of business or real estate. Design? My father had repeated, as if I'd said I was running away to join the circus. What kind of stable future is there in that? My mother had been more diplomatic but equally dismayed. Honey, we just want you to have security. Why not at least minor in business so you have something to fall back on? The unspoken message was clear. My chosen path wasn't valued because it didn't align with their definition of success. While my siblings received down payments for their homes as graduation gifts, I got a speech about financial independence being the best gift my parents could give me. After college, I started my own freelance web design business. The first few years were admittedly tough. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, drove a second-hand Honda, and carefully budgeted every expense. Meanwhile, family gatherings became increasingly uncomfortable showcases of material achievement. Last year's Christmas dinner remained vivid in my memory. Kyle had announced his purchase of a vacation property in Aspen. Ashley had shown off her new luxury SUV. When conversation turned to me, I'd mentioned landing my first major corporate client, only to have the topic quickly shift to Uncle Jack's new boat. My achievements simply didn't register on the family's success meter. As I pulled into my parents' circular driveway that Thanksgiving morning, I took a deep breath at the sight of the luxury vehicles already parked there: Kyle's new German sports car, Ashley and Brian's luxury SUV, my parents' high-end sedan. My 10-year-old Honda looked comically out of place. But I'd promised myself this time would be different. I wouldn't let their materialism affect my self-worth. Mom greeted me at the door with her usual perfume-scented hug. "Megan, darling, is that the same dress you wore to Easter?" She adjusted my collar with a slight frown. "You know, Ashley could take you shopping sometime. She has such an eye for quality pieces." "My dress is fine, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "How are you?" Dad barely looked up from his smartphone when I entered the living room. "Megan's here," he announced unnecessarily, before returning to his email. "Just finalizing a deal. 7 figures," he added, as if I needed the clarification. I nodded and smiled. running my thumb over the worn leather strap of my watch, the one possession I wore that brought me genuine comfort. If only they knew its story. But that would come later. The Mitchell family dining room was designed to impress. Crystal chandelier, custom cherrywood table that seated 16, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the perfectly landscaped backyard. For Thanksgiving, Mom had outdone herself as usual. Fine china, sterling silver cutlery, and fresh flower arrangements complemented the elaborate feast prepared by her part-time chef. As we took our seats, I found myself between Uncle Jack and Cousin Heather. Across from me, Kyle and Ashley exchanged knowing looks when they noticed my simple gold earrings, a stark contrast to the diamonds sparkling from Ashley's ears, neck, and wrists. "So Ashley, those new diamond studs are gorgeous," Mom commented as she passed the cranberry sauce. "Brian has such exquisite taste." Ashley touched her earrings with manicured fingers. "Anniversary gift." Though I did help by leaving the catalog open to the right page. She laughed lightly as everyone chuckled. "Speaking of gifts to oneself," Kyle interjected, "we just put down a deposit on a vacation home in the Bahamas. Beachfront. Private dock for the yacht we're considering." Jessica, his wife, nodded enthusiastically. "The children will love growing up with summers there. Though we're still deciding between the Bahamas and a chateau in southern France." "Why not both?" Dad suggested, only half joking. "Real estate is always a solid investment." I focused on my plate, pushing sweet potatoes around while the conversation continued in this vein. Uncle Jack described his recent Mediterranean cruise, Aunt Patricia detailed her kitchen renovation, and Cousin Heather showed off her 3-carat engagement ring. "Megan, you've been quiet," Mom eventually noted. "How's your website work going?" Before I could answer, Kyle jumped in. "Still driving that Honda, sis? I saw it outside. Must be 10 years old now? I'm surprised it still runs." "It runs perfectly fine," I replied evenly. "I don't see the point in taking on a car payment when what I have works well." "That's assuming you could qualify for financing," Kyle said with a smirk. "Don't creative types usually have trouble with credit?" Ashley nodded sympathetically. "It must be so hard with such an unpredictable income. I honestly don't know how you sleep at night without job security." "I have plenty of clients," I said, feeling my cheeks warm. "My business is doing well." "Well is relative," Dad commented. Kyle and Ashley had both purchased their first investment properties by your age. "Not everyone has the same priorities, Thomas," Mom said in what she probably thought was a supportive tone. "Megan's always been more bohemian." Ashley leaned forward. "You know, there's an entry-level marketing position opening up at the company. Nothing fancy, but it comes with benefits and a steady paycheck. I could put in a word." "I appreciate that, but I'm happy with my business," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "Happiness doesn't fund retirement accounts," Uncle Jack chimed in. "Back in my day, we understood the value of stability." I attempted to redirect the conversation. "Actually, I just completed a major website overhaul for." "Did you see the holiday bonus Thomas gave everyone this year?" Jessica interrupted, addressing the table. "Kyle's team is taking a corporate retreat to Hawaii in January. Spouses included, of course." "Well deserved," Dad nodded. The Southeast regional expansion exceeded projections by 23% under Kyle's leadership. And Ashley's new marketing campaign increased property inquiries by 30%. Mom added proudly. "Speaking of success," Brian said, raising his wine glass, "we should discuss the new family investment pool Thomas is setting up." As the gravy boat passed my way, I felt invisible again. The family disappointment whose achievements didn't merit airtime. I caught Ashley giving my simple cardigan a dismissive glance, then whispering something to Jessica that made them both suppress smiles. I thought about my recent professional victory, landing a contract with a tech startup that could potentially lead to more high-profile work, but decided against mentioning it again. Experience had taught me that my success simply didn't register on their scale. Instead, I turned my attention to the mashed potatoes and tried to look interested as Cousin Heather detailed her upcoming wedding plans, including the Swarovski crystal-encrusted centerpieces that cost more than my monthly rent. The tension that had been building all evening reached its peak when Dad tapped his crystal glass with his fork, commanding everyone's attention. The dining room fell silent as he stood at the head of the table, the patriarch ready to make an announcement. While we're all together, I wanted to discuss an exciting investment opportunity I've been developing, he began, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used in board meetings. I've secured access to a pre-IPO investment in a tech company that's poised to revolutionize the real estate market. My contact at Goldman Sachs assures me this will yield significant returns within 18 months. Kyle and Ashley exchanged excited glances. I'm creating a family investment pool, Dad continued. Minimum buy-in is $50,000, and I'm expecting everyone to participate at some level. This is the kind of opportunity that builds generational wealth. Count us in for $200,000, Kyle announced immediately, placing his arm around Jessica's shoulders. We've been looking to diversify our portfolio anyway. Ashley nodded eagerly. Brian and I will match that. The timing is perfect since we just got that bonus. Dad beamed at them with unmistakable pride before his eyes landed on me. The subtle shift in his expression said everything. Expectation mixed with preemptive disappointment. Megan, will you be participating? He asked. Though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. I felt every eye at the table turn to me. The cranberry sauce suddenly seemed intensely interesting as I formulated my response. I don't have $50,000 liquid right now, I admitted quietly. I've been reinvesting in my business. The silence that followed was deafening until Mom broke it with her well-intentioned but mortifying suggestion. Darling, you know we could help you if you just ask, she said, her voice dripping with pity. There's no shame in needing assistance at your age. Kyle couldn't resist. Or she could get a real job that provides actual financial stability. Those website things are a dime a dozen these days, aren't they? Everyone's nephew is building them for pocket money. I gripped my fork tighter. My business grossed 6 figures last year. Gross doesn't mean much after expenses and taxes, Uncle Jack pointed out. Back in my day we focused on building careers, not playing around with computers. It's not playing, I said firmly. I run a legitimate business with clients who value my work. Ashley reached across the table to pat my hand condescendingly. Of course they do, sweetie. But wouldn't it be nice not to worry about where your next paycheck is coming from? I know a position in our HR department that would be perfect for someone with your creative background. I'm not interested in working for the family business, I repeated for what felt like the 1,000th time. Which is exactly why you can't participate in family opportunities like this investment, Dad concluded with finality. You can't have it both ways, Megan. Cousin Heather, perhaps trying to diffuse the tension, changed the subject to her wedding plans. We've booked the plaza for June, she announced. The floral budget alone is $50,000, but Bradley's parents insisted. Oh, and speaking of watches, she extended her wrist to display a dainty diamond-encircled timepiece. Bradley surprised me with this Cartier last weekend. Isn't it divine? This prompted a showcase of luxury watches around the table. Dad proudly displayed his newest Rolex, a limited edition he'd acquired at a charity auction. Kyle showed off his Patek Philippe, while Ashley and Brian compared their matching Breitlings. What about you, Megan? Uncle Jack asked, gesturing to my wrist. That looks like something from a department store clearance rack. I instinctively covered my watch with my other hand. It was the one possession I truly cherished, not for any prestige, but because I discovered it myself at a flea market last year, and had been drawn to its simple elegance. It keeps time, I said simply. That's what a watch is supposed to do. Kyle snorted. A watch is supposed to make a statement. Yours says, I shop at thrift stores. At least she's being financially responsible in some ways, Jessica added with a laugh that others around the table joined. I felt my cheeks burning as I stared down at my plate. The familiar feeling of inadequacy washed over me, the same feeling I'd had at countless family gatherings before. But this time something was different. This time, Dad's gaze had locked onto my wrist with an intensity I'd never seen before. The atmosphere in the dining room shifted subtly when Dad abruptly stopped mid-sentence during a conversation about golf memberships. His eyes narrowed, focused intently on my wrist as I reached for my water glass. Megan, he said, his voice unusually serious. That watch. Let me see it. The table fell silent. All eyes moved from Dad's suddenly intense expression to my wrist. Self-consciously, I placed my arm on the table, revealing the vintage timepiece I'd been wearing for months. It wasn't flashy. A simple round face with elegant numerals, a worn brown leather strap, and a subtle gold bezel. I'd found it at a Sunday flea market buried under a pile of costume jewelry. The vendor had wanted $60, but I'd negotiated down to $50, attracted by its understated design and the way it seemed to have a history of its own. Dad got up from his seat at the head of the table and walked over to me, an unprecedented move during a family dinner. He gently took my wrist, turning it to examine the watch face, his expression growing increasingly astonished. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "A flea market in Brooklyn last spring," I replied, confused by his interest. "Why?" Instead of answering, he carefully unbuckled the strap and removed the watch from my wrist, turning it over to examine the back. The rest of the family watched in bewildered silence. "Thomas?" Mom finally asked. "What is it?" Dad looked up, his expression a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "If this is authentic, and I believe it is, this is a 1957 Patek Philippe Calatrava reference 2526 with the original enamel dial." He looked at me with new eyes. "Megan, do you have any idea what you're wearing?" I shook my head, completely lost. "I paid $50 for it. I just liked how it looked." Kyle snorted dismissively. "Dad, come on. There's no way that's a real Patek. It's obviously a knockoff." Dad shook his head slowly, still examining the watch. "The craftsmanship is unmistakable. Look at the enamel dial, that cream color is specific to the first series. And the case has the correct hallmarks." He turned it over again. "The movement. If this is original." Uncle Jack, who shared Dad's interest in fine watches, had come around to look over his shoulder. "Good God, Thomas, I think you're right. That's the original caliber 12 to 600 at movement. Look at the finishing on those bridges." "Will someone please explain what's happening?" Mom demanded, looking between Dad and Uncle Jack with growing impatience. Dad looked up, his eyes wide. "If this watch is authentic, and I'm almost certain it is, it's worth somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000, possibly more. Given the condition, and if it has the original movement." A stunned silence fell over the table. All eyes turned to me with new interest. That's impossible," I stammered, feeling suddenly lightheaded. "It was in a box of old jewelry at a flea market." "Incredible finds happen," Uncle Jack said, shaking his head in amazement. "Some poor soul had no idea what they were selling. These early Calatravas in original condition are extremely rare. Collectors go crazy for them." "Let me see," Kyle demanded, reaching for the watch that Dad was still holding reverently. For the first time that evening, I noticed a hint of jealousy in my brother's expression. Dad handed the watch to Uncle Jack instead. "What do you think, Jack? You know these better than I do." Uncle Jack examined it carefully, holding it up to the light. "The enamel has that distinctive cream color that can't be replicated. The proportions are perfect. Even the patina on the case." He whistled low. "Thomas, I think your daughter stumbled onto a legitimate horological treasure." Ashley, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "Are you sure it's not a reproduction? There are some very good fakes out there." "The devil is in the details," Uncle Jack replied, pulling out his reading glasses for a closer look. "Modern reproductions always get something wrong: the typeface of the numerals, the finish on the case, the weight. This has all the hallmarks of authenticity." Dad took the watch back from Uncle Jack, still marveling at it. The reference 2526 was Patek's first automatic watch. They only made about 2,800 of them, and those with the original enamel dial are the most valuable. Collectors consider it one of the finest time-only watches ever made. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this information. The watch I'd been casually wearing for months, through grocery shopping, client meetings, even while cleaning my apartment, was apparently worth more than my annual income. I had no idea. I finally managed to say, "I just thought it looked classic." "You have a better eye than you realize," Uncle Jack said with newfound respect. Dad carefully handed the watch back to me. our eyes meeting in a moment of connection that felt entirely new. For the first time in years, he was looking at me not with disappointment, but with something approaching admiration. "We should get this authenticated and appraised properly," he said. "I know someone at Sotheby's who specializes in vintage Pateks. I can call him tomorrow." As I slipped the watch back onto my wrist, I became acutely aware of how differently everyone was looking at me now. The same family members who had been dismissing my career choices minutes ago were suddenly regarding me with new interest. Kyle cleared his throat. Well, little sister. Looks like you stumbled into some luck." His tone was light, but I could hear the strain behind it. Luck. Of course that's how they would see it. Not as an eye for quality or understated beauty, just dumb luck. But as I looked down at the watch, now transformed in my eyes from a simple accessory to a valuable treasure, I realized that something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. For better or worse, I was no longer just the struggling creative in their eyes. The rest of the dinner unfolded like a scene from a movie I couldn't quite believe I was starring in. The same relatives who had been dismissing my career choices and financial decisions minutes earlier were now showering me with attention that felt both gratifying and unsettling. "Megan, darling," Mom said, leaning across the table with newfound interest. "You never told us you had an interest in fine timepieces. Is that something you've been studying?" Before I could answer, Kyle jumped in. "Pure luck. No offense, sis, but you didn't know what you had." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Some people just fall into good fortune while others work for it." "Exactly how much did you say it might be worth?" Ashley asked, directing her question to Dad rather than me, as if I couldn't possibly understand the answer. "Depending on the condition of the movement and the provenance we can establish, anywhere from 80 to 120,000, Dad repeated, still occasionally glancing at my wrist. "Though at auction with the right buyers it could go higher." Brian, Ashley's husband, who had barely spoken to me all evening, suddenly slid into the empty chair beside me. "You know, Megan, I have a client who specializes in luxury watch investments. I'd be happy to put you in touch. For family, he might even waive his usual commission." "That's thoughtful," I replied, uncomfortable with his sudden proximity. Uncle Jack pulled out his phone. "Mind if I take a few photos? I'm in a watch collectors group online. They'll be amazed by this find." Before I could respond, he was already snapping pictures of my wrist. I felt like an artifact on display rather than a person. "What are you planning to do with it?" Jessica asked, her voice honeyed with fake casualness. "I mean, it doesn't really go with your usual style." She gestured vaguely at my modest outfit. "I haven't thought about it," I said honestly. "I just found out what it is 5 minutes ago." Dad placed his hand on my shoulder, the first time he'd initiated physical contact all day. "You should let me help you sell it, Megan. This is exactly the kind of thing that requires proper connections. My friend at Sotheby's could ensure you get top dollar." "And what would you do with that kind of money?" Ashley asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "That could be a down payment on a real condo instead of that rental you're in. Or an investment in the family fund," Dad suggested immediately. "The timing is perfect." "Actually," Kyle nodded enthusiastically, "that's actually not a bad idea. Turn one stroke of luck into a real investment strategy." The subtext was clear. They still didn't see me as capable of making my own financial decisions. The watch had value to them, but my judgment did not. I thought back to all the times I tried to share my professional accomplishments, only to be met with dismissal or disinterest. Just 30 minutes ago, they'd been treating me like a financial failure. Now they were falling over themselves to help me manage a valuable asset. "I think the watch should stay in the family regardless," Ashley said pointedly. "It's clearly a significant piece that would be wasted on someone who doesn't appreciate fine horology." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, finding my voice. Ashley backpedaled slightly. "I just mean you're not really into luxury items. You've always been so practical." She made it sound like a character flaw. "Maybe we could buy it from you," Jessica suggested. "As Kyle's milestone birthday is coming up, of course we'd give you a fair price." "A fair price determined by whom?" I asked, my irritation growing. "I'd be happy to broker the deal," Kyle offered magnanimously. "For a small family commission, of course." He laughed as if he'd made a joke, but his eyes remained calculating. Mom refilled my wine glass without asking. It's almost like the universe is giving you a sign, darling. A chance to get on more solid financial footing. As they continued discussing my watch, and by extension my financial future, as if I weren't present, a realization crystallized in my mind. The watch had merely exposed what had always been true. In my family's eyes, my value was determined by my financial worth. Now that I possessed something of monetary value, I was suddenly worth listening to, or at least worth talking about. Cousin Heather, who had barely spoken 3 words to me all evening, now slid into the conversation. Megan, I've been thinking. Would you consider designing my wedding website? I just realized I should support family talent. We could feature your business on our Instagram. We have over 10,000 followers, you know. The same cousin who had never shown any interest in my career was now seeing me as a useful connection. The transparency was almost impressive. Your design business might actually be more interesting than I realized, Ashley added, typing something into her phone. What's your website again? I should check it out. My website, the same one they dismissed as a hobby earlier in the evening. As dessert was served, the conversation continued to revolve around my watch, with speculations about its history, suggestions for its future, and thinly veiled attempts to influence my decision about what to do with it. I found myself withdrawing emotionally, nodding politely while a storm brewed inside me. Years of feeling inadequate despite working hard. Years of having my choices questioned and my accomplishments minimized, all thrown into sharp relief by their sudden change in attitude over a material possession. When Uncle Jack began explaining watch investment strategies to me as if I were a child, something inside me snapped. The watch felt heavy on my wrist, weighed down by their expectations and judgments. I realized I needed to leave before I said something I couldn't take back. Excuse me, I said, standing abruptly. I need some air. I walked out to the back patio, the cool November air a welcome relief from the suffocating atmosphere inside. Behind me, I could hear the conversation continuing, still about the watch, still about what I should do with this unexpected windfall, still operating on the assumption that I couldn't possibly make a good decision without their guidance. Standing alone under the stars, I ran my finger over the watch face, the object that had simultaneously increased my worth in my family's eyes while making me feel more worthless than ever. I don't know how long I stood on the patio, gathering my thoughts and trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. The watch on my wrist, once just a pretty accessory I'd admired, now felt like a spotlight illuminating every painful dynamic in my family relationship. The sliding glass door opened behind me, and Dad stepped out, 2 snifters of his expensive brandy in hand. He offered one to me with a smile that seemed more genuine than any he'd given me in years. Thought you might want to warm up, he said, joining me at the railing. It's getting chilly out here. I accepted the glass but didn't drink. Thanks. He gestured toward my wrist. Still can't believe you found that at a flea market. The watch gods were smiling on you that day. Is that what it takes? I asked quietly. What do you mean? I turned to face him directly. Is that what it takes to be seen in this family? To have something of monetary value? Dad blinked, clearly taken aback by my directness. Megan, that's not fair. We've always supported you. Have you? I asked, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. Because from where I stand, I've been the family disappointment since I chose design school over the family business. That's not true, isn't it? I interrupted. When was the last time anyone asked about my work with genuine interest? When was the last time my accomplishments were celebrated at a family dinner the way Kyle and Ashley's are? Dad frowned. We ask about your work all the time. You ask if I'm still doing that website thing, Dad. That's not the same as actually caring about my career. He took a sip of his brandy, buying time. It's just hard for us to understand your choices sometimes. We want security for you. No, I said firmly. You want me to want what you want. There's a difference. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sounds of the family chatting and laughing drifted through the glass doors. They had already moved on to other topics now that the watch novelty had worn off. Do you know why I love what I do? I finally asked. Dad shook his head slightly. I create things that help people connect with their customers. I solve problems. I make the digital world more accessible and beautiful. I felt my voice growing stronger. Last month, I redesigned a website for a small bakery that was struggling. Their online orders increased by 300% after my redesign. The owner cried when she called to thank me. I took a breath before continuing. 2 months ago, I finished a major project for Tech Future Innovations. Yes, the same Tech Future that's been featured in Fortune magazine. They specifically sought me out because they liked my portfolio. That project led to 3 more high-profile clients. My business isn't just surviving, Dad. It's thriving. Dad looked genuinely surprised. You never mentioned Tech Future. I tried. At least 3 times. But the conversation always gets redirected to Kyle's latest acquisition, or Ashley's marketing genius. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I didn't realize. I know you didn't. Because success that doesn't look like yours isn't recognized as success in this family. I gestured toward the house. Do you know what my business grossed last year? Over $200,000. I reinvested most of it into better equipment, office space, and hiring a part-time assistant. I've been building something sustainable rather than flashy. Dad's eyebrows raised. I had no idea you were doing that well. Because you never asked. You just assumed that because I don't drive a luxury car or wear designer clothes I must be struggling. I turned my wrist, looking down at the watch that had caused such a stir. The irony is, I chose this watch because it was elegant without being showy. I liked that it had history. I liked that it wasn't screaming for attention. Those are the same values I bring to my business and my life. Substance over flash, quality over status. But those aren't the values this family celebrates. Dad was quiet for a long moment, swirling the brandy in his glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was contemplative. Your grandfather, my father, wore the same Timex for 40 years. Refused to upgrade even when he could afford to. Said it reminded him of where he came from. This was a story I'd never heard before. Really? Dad nodded. He thought my interest in luxury watches was frivolous. We argued about it more than once. He gave a small rueful laugh. Maybe there's more of him in you than in me. It was the closest thing to understanding that he'd ever offered about our different perspectives. I'm not asking everyone to understand my choices, I said, softening my tone slightly. I'm just asking for the same respect given to Kyle and Ashley's decisions. And the watch? He asked, gesturing to my wrist. What will you do with it now that you know what it is? I considered the question seriously. I don't know yet. But whatever I decide, it will be my decision. Not a family committee vote. Dad looked like he wanted to argue but instead nodded slowly. It is yours, after all. Yes, I agreed firmly. It is. Just like my business is mine. Just like my life path is mine. We stood in silence for another moment before I added, I should probably head home. It's a long drive back to the city. You're not staying for dessert? Your mother made your favorite apple pie. I think I've had enough family time for one holiday. I said, not unkindly. Please thank Mom for dinner. As I turned to go, Dad surprised me by placing his hand on my arm. Megan. The watch. It's quite remarkable that you found it. But it's not the most valuable thing about you. I hope you know that. The words were right, but they came too late and too conveniently after the watch revelation to feel entirely genuine. Still, it was a start. I do know that, I replied. I've always known that. I just wasn't sure that you did. I left him standing on the patio and made my way through the dining room, saying quick goodbyes despite protests and questions about my early departure. As I drove away from the mansion where I'd grown up, the watch on my wrist felt different. No longer just an accessory, but a catalyst for change. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen by my family, even if it took a rare timepiece to make it happen. More importantly, I had finally found the courage to speak my truth after years of silent acquiescence. Whether they chose to really hear me remained to be seen. But I had taken the first step toward establishing new boundaries. The watch had value, certainly, but finding my voice? That was priceless. 1 month after the Thanksgiving dinner revelation, I sat in my studio apartment that doubled as my office, finalizing designs for a new client project. My space wasn't large or luxurious, but it was thoughtfully arranged, a testament to my belief that good design didn't require excessive space or expense. The morning light filtered through my windows, catching on the vintage watch that still adorned my wrist. In the weeks since discovering its value, I'd had it properly authenticated by an expert watchmaker in Brooklyn, not my father's contact at Sotheby's. The watchmaker had confirmed what Dad and Uncle Jack suspected. It was indeed an authentic Patek Philippe Calatrava reference 2526 with the original enamel dial, worth approximately $110,000 in its current condition. The knowledge had changed my relationship with the watch, but not in the way my family might have expected. Rather than rushing to sell it or trade up for something flashier, I found myself appreciating it on a deeper level. Its craftsmanship, its history, and the remarkable journey that had brought it to my wrist. My phone rang, displaying Mom's number. Our conversations had been strained but more frequent since Thanksgiving. "Hi, Mom," I answered, setting aside my stylus. "Megan, darling. Just checking in. Have you given any more thought to your father's investment opportunity? The deadline is coming up next week." Some things hadn't changed. "I've made my decision about that and about the watch," I replied calmly. "Oh." Her voice held poorly disguised eagerness. "And what have you decided?" "I had a long talk with my financial advisor yesterday." I emphasized the word "my" slightly, a small but important distinction from Dad's financial advisor, or the family financial advisor, that they'd been pushing me to consult. "And?" Mom prompted when I didn't immediately continue. "And I've decided to keep the watch for now." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Keep it? But darling, it's not really your style, is it? And that kind of money could be working for you." "The watch is working for me," I replied. "Every time I look at it, it reminds me to trust my own judgment. After all, I recognized its value long before I knew its price tag." Mom sighed. "Well, it is your decision. Though your father will be disappointed you're not joining the family investment. I've made other investments that make more sense for my situation," I explained. "I've expanded my business, hired a full-time assistant, and upgraded my equipment. Those investments are already paying dividends." "That's sensible, I suppose," Mom conceded, though her tone suggested she still didn't quite understand my priorities. After we hung up, I checked my email to find separate messages from both Kyle and Ashley. Since Thanksgiving, they'd each reached out multiple times with suggestions about the watch. Kyle had sent links to auction houses and offered to manage the sale process for me. Ashley had introduced me to 3 different financial advisors from her social circle, all of whom had contacted me with investment proposals. Today's messages were more of the same, Kyle forwarding an article about a similar watch that had sold for a record price, Ashley sending information about a jewelry insurance policy she thought I should consider. I appreciated that they were trying in their own way to be helpful, but underlying their assistance was the same assumption that had always stung, that I couldn't handle important decisions without their guidance. My response to both was polite but firm. "Thanks for thinking of me. I've got things handled." Shortly after, my new assistant Rachel arrived for our morning meeting. A recent design school graduate, she brought fresh perspectives and enthusiasm that had already proved valuable to my growing client base. "Morning, boss," she greeted cheerfully, setting down a tray with 2 coffees. "Ready to go over the Anderson presentation?" As we reviewed the work, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Thought you might like to see this. Found it while cleaning out old files." Attached was a photo of a much younger me, maybe 7 or 8 years old, sitting at his desk drawing intently on a sketchpad. I was wearing his oversized watch on my tiny wrist. It must have been 10 times too big for me. I smiled at the memory and texted back. "I remember that. You let me wear your watch for a whole day because I said it made me feel grown up." His response came quickly. "You always had your own sense of style. Even then." It was a small acknowledgement, but it felt significant. A recognition that perhaps my path had been consistent all along, even if it wasn't the one he would have chosen for me. Later that afternoon, I met with the financial advisor I'd selected, a woman who specialized in working with creative entrepreneurs. Together, we had developed a plan that aligned with my values and goals. Balancing business growth with personal security. The watch gives you options, she had pointed out during our first meeting. But there's no rush to exercise them. Sometimes an asset is more valuable kept than converted. Her words had resonated with me. The watch had become a symbol, not of status or wealth as my family might define it, but of trusting my own instincts. I had been drawn to its understated elegance long before I knew its monetary value, just as I had been drawn to a career path that fulfilled me creatively rather than financially. As December turned to January, the holiday cards arrived. Most were the standard family photos and generic well wishes, but the card from my parents stood out. Inside, beneath the printed sentiment, Dad had written, "Your grandfather's birthday is coming up in March. Thought you might like to join me at the Watch Museum exhibit opening in his honor. Your expertise might spot something the rest of us miss." It wasn't an apology or a complete understanding, but it was an invitation to connect on new terms, one that acknowledged that my perspective had value. I ran my fingers over the aged leather strap of my watch, thinking about the journey both it and I had taken. The timepiece had traveled from some unknown owner's wrist through decades, and likely multiple hands before finding its way to that flea market table where I'd discovered it. Its value had always been there, waiting to be recognized by the right person. Sometimes I reflected people are like that too. Their true worth isn't always obvious at first glance. It takes the right circumstances, and often the right observer, to recognize their unique value. As I prepared for my evening client meeting, I glanced at my watch one last time. Beyond telling time, it now marked a pivotal moment in my life, the moment I stopped seeking validation from others and fully embraced the path I'd chosen. The most valuable things I'd learned aren't always the ones with the highest price tag. Sometimes they're the moments of clarity that change how we see ourselves and our place in the world. My watch had given me that, and for that reason it would remain on my wrist, a constant reminder that true worth comes from within, not from others' perceptions. Have you ever had a moment when something unexpected completely changed how your family saw you? Or better yet, changed how you saw yourself? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics and finding your own path. Remember, sometimes the most valuable things in life aren't the ones with the highest price tags, but the ones that help us recognize our own worth. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it resonates with some of you out there who might be on your own journey to self-validation.